right, finally this morning, kind of a different angle here. We're taking a look at the relationship between misogyny and autocracy that's playing out around the world. Joining us now, founder of All In Together, Lauren Leader and professor of history at New York University, Ruth Ben-Ghiat. She's the author of the book, Strong Men, Mussolini to the Present. And Lauren, you actually sent us this analysis in Foreign Affairs magazine that examines the links between misogyny and autocracy. It warns, quote, while the 20th century saw improvements in women's equality in most parts of the world, the 21st is demonstrating that misogyny and authoritarianism are not just common comorbidities, but mutually reinforcing ills. Explain.
Yeah, I was stunned by this report. I thought it was extraordinary. And I've been thinking about this for a long time because, you know, the United States over the last 20 plus years, really starting with the Bush 43 administration and our engagement in Afghanistan, had recognized as part of our foreign policy that women were critical to stabilizing democracies that were nationed around the world. And we invested very heavily in making sure that women's rights were part of our support of democracy. And what the report really shows is that around the world, and including here in the United States, where you see backsliding democracy, as we talk about so much on this show, and the risks that are posed by it, that there's a direct link to institutionalized misogyny, that the rollback of women's rights, the rollback of women's participation in democracy undermines democracy itself. And I think it's an incredibly important report and a really important trend that we should be watching closely here and around the world.
Ruth Ben-Ghiat, you write about strong men, and does this compute?
Oh, absolutely. And, you know, it's very easy for us to laugh at, we're talking about Putin a lot. You know, he does ice baths, he's stripping his shirt off, and it's easy not to take that seriously. But it's deadly serious, because when we look at when strong men appeal in a society, it's when there's been a lot of gender emancipation. And so they're like a kind of corrective to the feeling that males are losing control over bodies. There's also the thing that autocracy is about lawlessness. And so look at what Trump's done, this kind of macho lawlessness that becomes something that's prized in a society. So that's why I dedicated in Strong Men a whole chapter to machismo, looking at it as a tool of rule alongside corruption and propaganda. It's really important.
So, Lauren, this is Eddie Glauc. Thank you for this. Do we see this element in Trumpism? Is it a feature of Trumpism as what we've experienced over these last few years?
Well, I think certainly the sort of toxic masculinity that goes hand in hand with Trumpism is undeniable. But also, let's look at what's happening for voting rights in the United States. You know, we talk a lot about the rollback of access to the polls, the laws that have been passed around the country that restrict access. We don't often talk about what that does to women's democratic participation. You know, it's very hard to wait online to vote for 6 hours if you don't have childcare. In places where they've rolled back things like drive-through voting, there's a concern that that's going to disproportionately affect women. So I think what you see is this link, and then obviously some of Trump's most ardent supporters who, you know, have been who have a history of, you know, abuse towards women, et cetera. So I think there is a link. We have to look at it. And Ruth is right. The machismo, sort of toxic masculinity, goes hand in hand with autocracy. It's a red flag. It's a canary in the coal mine. We should be watching for it here and everywhere around the world.
Well, you know, Ruth, it's so interesting. We were talking earlier this morning about how Donald Trump did better, especially with Hispanic men, than the Biden campaign ever imagined they would. And they started saying early on, months before the election, said he's got this strong man shtick going. And there are a lot of men, not just Hispanic men, but in this case, it did bump the numbers up. And in some black men, it did bump the numbers up. And that appealed across demographic boundaries.
Yeah, because the personality cult, which Trump certainly has one, is all about being the man that other men would like to be, the man who gets away with things. So that's why when he said, when the Access Hollywood tapes broke right before the election, I knew this would help him, but certain people not hurt him.
Wow. Ruth Ben-Ghiat and Lauren Leader, thank you both very much for being on this morning. And that does it for us this morning.